As long as I can remember, I was always fascinated by the incredible wildlife that could be found in the forests, beaches, mountains, and deserts my family and I visited and passed through on our road trips and vacations. My father taught me not only respect all wildlife, but also how to blend in and to enjoy it by being quiet, patient, and observant. He also taught me how to be ready to lend a helping hand to the young and the injured. For numerous reasons that I hope will become quite obvious in this presentation, the ravens have always stood out as something extra special. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to help out an abandoned baby raven. In the short time I nursed this raven back into the wild, I learned ravens are more unique than I had ever dreamed they could be. What I especially enjoyed was watching how he chose to tease not only the other animals, both wild and domestic, but also the humans that live all throughout the neighborhood. I was curious to see if I could see the same behavioral traits in the wild birds and if they would manifest in a similar or completely different way. After talking to many owners who have had similar experiences, I thought someone has got to share this. And that's what brought me to the wild ravens I had seen for many years every time I passed Crystal Cove State Park. What follows is the true stories I have videotaped over the last 2 decades with the birds.
You silly bird.
At times, I will be sharing my prior short stories with Huey and then giving examples of what I have experienced with the wild ravens in different parts of the country. I hope you will be as amazed and entertained by these truly magnificent birds as I am.
What are you doing?
We'll begin our year with the ravens in spring, and then I'll take you through each of the other 3 seasons and show you how the birds develop through all of their growth stages, from egg to nesting to fledgling to juvenile to subadult, and what they will be learning in each of these 4 seasons before they are old enough to find a mate and territory of their own. Spring. Every raven begins its life in an egg that's laid in a one-of-a-kind nest that only ravens make. The female may lay anywhere between 1 and 8 eggs. A magical thing in itself, the egg protects and nourishes a bird from its very beginning as a fertilized zygote to the newborn hatchling. Because I conduct my study in a protected state park, I purposely don't bother the birds during the nesting egg stage. So I'll just show you these excellent examples from the Western Foundation of Vertebrate Zoology, also called the Camarillo Bird Museum. Ravens are born with their eyes closed, but as soon as the hatchling opens its eyes, it bonds or imprints onto whoever is feeding it. This is a bird's very first relationship. It then begins to notice and to learn to relate to its siblings. All of my raven couples generally have between 3 and 6 young in what is called a brood. Here you see the young have hatched and are up and moving about. Ravens grow very fast and appear very close to adult size in just about 3 weeks. During this time in the nest, they are already getting used to competing with their siblings for food, the best spot to sit, mom or dad's attention, and even before they get out of the nest, they learn the art of teasing and are already very aware of the reaction they'll get by pulling their sibling's tail, wing, or just about any feather. And now the real fun is about to begin as I wait in anticipation for the young to begin to venture off the nest, and then start to fly. But more often than not, it takes somewhere around 30 days before they will actually start to try to fly. As the young bird actually begins to fly, I notice the environment has already had an influence on the birds. They've got to be able to get up and off the ground and know when to stay off the ground, because depending on what part of the world they're in, there's many that would like these young ravens for lunch. Bobcats, coyotes,
Oh, hi there.
fox,
Goodbye.
hawks, peregrine falcons, and others like them. A young raven caught on the ground is no match for many adult animals out hunting for food for its own young. But now, it's time to fly.
Is he trying to learn to fly?
Yeah, he's trying to get up to mom.
If there's a time in my relationship with my wife where I could say I might bug her a bit, it would be when the baby ravens are learning to fly. Fortunately, I have my class I teach at Crystal Cove every Wednesday, so at least I get to have breakfast with them once in a while and spend much of the day knowing they are close by. But even on days off, I'm asking, want to go down to Crystal Cove? A little more often than maybe she might like to hear. But in my defense, it's like getting to go to an air show every year. How many times can you see a P-51 Mustang in the air before it's too much? How many acrobatic World War I era biplanes can you watch spin and fall? How many military jets can you watch perform their amazing stunts before it's too much?
Is that cool or what? That guy in the center is spinning.
When it comes to the magic of flight, is there ever too much? That's the question I have to address every year when it comes to the ravens. See, I just marvel at the whole flight thing, and watching the young ravens do it every year never gets tiring, because it seems there's always something new, something unique. Each and every year, one will do some unique maneuver I've never seen or caught on tape before. We learned with our bird they're really not taught to fly. They just do it naturally. It's almost magic.
Good job.
Each day, they get more confident and they begin to make their way further and further from the nest area. Within a week or two, they become extremely proficient in the air. Let's take a look at some of the slow motion examples. A flip, now in slow motion. How about some quick cuts? We'll slow it down for you. All this amazing aerial display. But then they still have quite a ways to go when it comes to landing. Or sitting on a wire.
Nice move. Nice move. Yeah, I like that. Can you do that again?
Or
Nice move. Oh, yeah, that was good. That was good. Nice move.
I've noticed every brood has its runt. This bird is the one I find spending so much time alone, totally entertained somewhere up on the hill, digging in the sand, or playing with some special treasure all by itself. The runt is almost always the last one to bathe, the last to bed at sunset, and the last to care whether it eats or not. The runt was also the one who most likely stayed behind with me and either played or talked. Now that they are out and about and getting far more confident with their flying skills, they become far more aware of their environment and other things they share their territory with. This is one of the more vulnerable times in their life because they start following and mimicking the parents, and I don't think they quite perceive their mortality yet. One of my biggest hurdles with Huey, the young bird I helped to get back into the wild, was how to teach it to fear things that would harm it. Fear for these young birds is not instinct. The parents have to teach them this. We've already mentioned the runt, but I also learned who is the more dominant one in the brood and who are the more subservient. The pecking order isn't as pronounced and obvious as chickens, but it's there. Let's talk about what ravens eat. In my travels, I think I've seen ravens eating anything and everything at one time or another. Breakfast waffles, offhand, I can't think of anything specific they won't try or carry away and cache at least once. I can tell you bugs are big, and it may be one of the reasons why they fly so wacky sometimes. There have been numerous times I've got a shot of a raven doing a fantastic dive or turn and then gotten home and see that they were most likely chasing a bug. By now, the young birds are truly some of the great masters of the sky. About the only thing I don't see them do is try to reach the speeds of a falcon in a long dive. Whether they can physically do that or not is beyond my means to test, but then why would a raven need to do that? That kind of behavior doesn't fit a raven's personality. But I do see them hover in place and even go backwards. Not the same way or to the same degree a hummingbird does, but they do choose to fly backwards, sideways, and hover when it's necessary to do so. They also remind me of swifts with their very quick turns and racing around. They soar like seabirds and they can stay almost as rigid as a hawk if they need to do so. But staying in one place is also not a raven's personality. They also seem to love to fly with everything they share the sky with. Is this raven showing off? I mean, does it appear to you that he's kind of watching what the plane does, and then appears to go and outdo it? Almost begging the question, Can you do this? To me, flight is an engineering marvel, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a miracle anything at all can fly, let alone a bird who is specifically born to do so, naturally and effortlessly. Every natural physical characteristic of a bird says fly, from the strength and lightness of their bones to their one-way lungs, to the intricacies of each and every feather. And in time, I'm convinced we will find that birds did not come from reptiles or dinosaurs. They are a one-of-a-kind creature, specifically engineered with the ability to fly in the sky above us, and that they were made to wow and entertain us. Movies now even CGI birds into the panoramic views to give the scenes a richer, fuller, and more realistic moving effect. Birds were made to fly. Ravens are some of the best at it. Huey played hard, and then he'd rest, and his rest might be taken in a number of different ways. He loved opening his wings and mouth and would just sit and sun himself. He'd sit in the shade of a tree. I find the wild birds doing exactly the same. Quiet time for the wild birds comes at different times of the day and at different ways depending on the activity prior to the resting time. During this last part of spring, the young birds are only a few weeks old, and already they are turning towards almost a teenager-like existence. Not quite so dependent on mom and dad, yet still looking for a handout. Depending on how early they fledged, sometimes we can find them already out roaming around the neighborhood territories, causing trouble with the neighborhood kids. The parents in these other territories are not so happy, and they do their best to keep the uninvited troublemakers out. And just like teenagers, even when the kids are at home, they are beginning to spend more time away from mom and dad. Some choose to pair up and roam together.
Can you come land on me?
Others tend to spend more time all alone.
What do you got there? Yep, carry it, hide it.
And during this time, they're also learning to cache, and ravens excel at caching. That is, to hide something away where hopefully no one else can find it. I love to watch the kids find something, pick it up, hold it high so everyone else can see it, and maybe, just maybe, someone else will want it and a new game begins. If not, no worries, we'll just take it and cache it.
Then we're going to hide it. Yeah, there we go. And then cover it with a rock. Nope, that didn't quite work.
Now seagulls don't cache, so even though a raven will cache something right in full view of a seagull, the gull won't go and get it. But another raven will. Huey was always home by sunset, and it was one of the most fascinating times of the day, especially when he was very young. Both the young ravens and the juveniles seem to need to get their last bits of energy out before the sun goes down. When visiting a new area, I always watch and listen as the sun's going down to see if we might be close to an area where they gather to roost, because I love to observe their last of the day interactions with each other. They remind me of kids right as mom and dad are trying to get them to bed and get them to brush their teeth. And of course, they're off running in every direction except the one mom and dad want them to go. Did I tell you the runt is usually the last to bed? Summer. I found out by watching Huey that he naturally developed somewhat of a territory issue. Nothing could be in or stay in that loosely designated area that he didn't want to be there. It took me no time at all to figure out that the wild mated couples are even more defined in their version of what they would call their territory. The kids pretty much stick within their parents' territory for most of spring, but by summer they are now venturing off into the other couple's territories, and they seem to know exactly what they are doing. Of course, the other couples don't like it, and they will spend some serious energy trying to oust the invaders. There are times when it can get quite heated, and once in a while an adult raven will attack the young of another brood. I have never witnessed one hurting another bird, but sometimes it sounds kind of scary.
Hi there. Uh-oh. You must be one of Harold Mott's kids.
For the most part, these territories are well respected by the other adult ravens. There are a few times when exceptions will take place. These are the top 3, starting with number 3. Maybe once a year, but not every year, I'll see a whole group of juveniles as they make their way through the park. In instances like these, there are just too many of them for any of the couples to do anything about it. Usually I'll see this procession going across the hills behind the park, but twice I've seen it on the beach side, and it's quite a sight. This was way back in 2005, and there's about 25 young birds here. A sighting like this is extremely rare in my area. The number 2 exception might be during the mating season. Other ravens will come into the territories, and I'd say it might be the visitors are just checking the fidelity of the residing birds. They seem to be just making sure everyone is satisfied with the mate of their choice. The other mate will run the intruders out, but here again, sometimes there's just too many of them, and they might hang around for a while. Twice I've witnessed a quick touch-and-go relationship during mating season, but it was just that, and the original couples stayed together and are still together. And now for the number 1 reason as to why there might be other ravens in a guarded couple's territory. Ravens gather together to play. My buddy Huey and I used to play many different games. He played even more with neighbors, and some of the games were person-specific. In other words, he only played the "I'm taking your handkerchief and moving it just out of your reach over and over again" game with you, Scott, and he didn't play that game with anyone else. Or I'm playing hide and seek only with you.
Go get those crows.
I'm only teasing the crows with French fries. Huey didn't bother trying to tease any other bird or animal with French fries. Fact is, play is a big part of every young raven's day. Young ravens will hop and poke and play until food is present. Then they will run over and eat quickly. Then immediately run back to doing what they were doing before they had been interrupted. And by this time in summer, you'd think they were getting paid to play, because they get so good at it. It doesn't matter if it's on the ground,
Nice move.
There we go.
in the air,
Come on. There we go. That was perfect. Do that again. Do that again. See how they play on the hill?
or more often than not, a combination of both, back and forth.
That's what I like to see.
And I can just watch them for hours.
World War I biplanes and dogfights.
Now let's talk about Huey and teasing. I mentioned in the beginning how he would figure out how to tease someone in a very specific way. You could almost see the wheels turning. The wild birds do it too, but not quite to the same degree. But I love to watch as they find something, and then as if to say, "Ah, look, this is something really special." And then they'll hold it up high for all to see in hopes that somebody else will take an interest. And then hopefully they'll come and try and take it.
One little stick for the entire family. Isn't that pretty? that seagull. Yeah.
And then there's the tail pulling. Ravens are masters at pulling tails, and they will pull the tails of anything and everything, including wolves, eagles, condors, otters, and other animals far larger and stronger than themselves. They of course learn this right from the beginning, and they practice it on each other. And here is a favorite. You'll see a young raven with food, putting the food down so the seagull can see it, waiting until the seagull takes a number of steps towards it, and then right before the seagull gets there, he'll snatch it up and take it away.
You tease. It's like Scotty with the handkerchief.
I noticed Huey developed routines where he liked to do certain things at specific times of the day. I watched the wild birds to see if they do the same. With Huey, it was to get up at first light,
Sketch.
I'd feed him, and then we'd play a bit. And then he'd run off and he'd play with his crow buddies for a while. About 8 or 9, he'd come back to bathe or play. Sure enough, I find the wild birds doing something very similar, and by midsummer, the young ravens are in somewhat of a routine. This made them easy to find for me because no matter what time I arrived at the park, I'd have a pretty good idea where they most likely might be. Like Huey, they'd get up about first light and play and feed for a while. Then sometime between 8 and 9, they'd head for the area in their territory where there was fresh water available. Like Huey, they didn't bathe every day, but they did still head to the same fresh water source close to the same time most every day.
Hi, bud. You're sitting 3 feet from me.
Ravens go through a molting and lose their down feathers, and they can look pretty scraggly. The year we had Huey, it never got that hot for very long, so Huey lost his down, but it wasn't as drastic as I've seen in some of the wild birds. There's been a couple of really hot years where I really worried there was something wrong with the birds. For a time, they can get pretty scraggly looking.
Thank you.
The adults go through it too, but here again it's not as drastic as what some of the kids can look like. But as we will see in fall, when the new feathers grow in, they'll look richer and fuller than ever. Autumn or fall, In autumn or fall, we see the relationships continue to develop, with more play and more very serious goofing off. The siblings that are left, and that varies year by year, are now beginning to demonstrate how their individual personalities affect their day-to-day lives. I find this totally fascinating.
You gonna roll your brother right off the hill? You just gonna push him off the hill? All three of you? You guys are rotten.
Now is the time the dominant ones become more feisty. They jump to be first, to be noticed, or to be on top. The lesser ones become more subservient and kind of step out of the way of the ones that are more aggressive.
Kinda. What are you guys doing, huh?
Both play and food become a little rougher. Mom and Dad start backing off from feeding quite so much, so the kids have to start getting stuff on their own. And when one of the kids does find or is given something, they take it and run off all by themselves, not sharing any of the loot with anybody else. They even start fighting and holding out from their parents. But all the kids will still try to beg and get a free handout, even if sometimes they aren't hungry or they don't even want what Mom and Dad have available. Discipline also gets rougher and tougher, and both Mom and Dad start to lose patience. Many times they will snap at the kids when they get out of line. The parents also begin to purposely not feed the kids and will sometimes bicker with them and even chase them away from a food source. But something else happens during this time, and it amazes me even though it happens every year. Huey, our bird, would sit for half an hour to an hour and just talk, 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 talk.
Oh, whoa.
Imagine my surprise when I began to learn that every single year, one of the young birds, most often the runt, but sometimes more than one of them, will sit and yak for anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. Sometimes in a straight shoot. Sometimes one will start talking, then take off still talking, then return moments later, still talking, and will continue to talk. I'm totally baffled that a wild bird will just sit there and talk for an hour or so. As I said before, sometimes I'll just set up my camera and let it run. So I've become comfortable with the fact that there is magic in this world and that miracles do happen with those willing to look for them. Life with these birds has taught me I can't, nor do I need to, know it all. For me, that was a very freeing realization.
Whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa.
So I'm trying to understand this miracle I'm looking at. He is not your pet bird.
No, he's wild bird. Completely wild. So are these two over here.
Talk to you.
There's the red toy. See, he's playing follow the leader with these guys. He's trying to get these guys to chase him. We'll get him.
The young ravens continue through what I would call their juvenile stage. I call them juveniles for the entire time they were out of the nest but still under the adult's care, protection, and the adults still choose to feed them. Kind of like a teenager in high school. Their flying skills continue to improve, especially for the ones who go out and visit the neighbor kids. But still, the neighbor parents aren't too happy about the friends over after school, and they'll run them out of their territory. Sometimes right away, sometimes they'll let them play for a bit, and then they'll run them out. The length of this juvenile stage varies year to year. I've seen the adults begin kicking them out as early as 2 months after they start to fly. One year they started flying in May, and they were booted out in early July. But I'm usually seeing the kids leave somewhere between August and October. As fall comes to an end, all the kids are gone, and I call the stage they go through now kind of their subadult stage. They are no longer reliant on the parents for food, and in fact the parents have kicked them out of the territory. So now these sub or pre-adults have learned to pretty much take care of themselves. They're also easier to identify than raven adults because they tend to be noisier. Many of them still have some pink in their mouths. Eventually, that pink will go entirely black. This is the stage in their life when I don't get to spend as much time with them as I'd like to. Other than the 1 year when the terrorists were in the park for so long, I don't have constant contact with this group because the adults in Crystal Cove run them all out. A group of them may attempt to pass through, but they are usually attacked and asked to leave rather quickly. So I have to venture into other parts of the world to get my fix. Lone Pine, California, with the Alabama Hills and Mount Whitney as backdrops. Bishop, California has a dump just outside town that I check every time I go by, but only once in all the times I've been have I seen a large gathering of ravens. Death Valley, California has a great group of sub-adults, and I love watching them fidget, banter, and move for position before roosting for the night. It's my understanding from other researchers that these birds are usually between 1 and say 3 to 5 years old. They get together and form a temporary gang, living more like crows. When and if they find a suitable mate, then they pair up, and that's when I see them coming as a new couple that tries to homestead their own area in a park like where I'm at. I also see these groups in the Grand Canyon.
You dive for me? Like that.
Another one of my favorite places to visit this group is Catalina Island. Here I find a combination of both mating adults and subadults, sometimes working side by side. I get sunrises, sunsets, and many chase scenes here. Winter. Winter is generally a time of peace and tranquility. Now I get to see ravens really be ravens, and I especially enjoy visiting old friends on our yearly winter road trips through the wild west of the United States and Canada. During this time, I also get to see some of the many ways adult ravens demonstrate their unique intelligence through teamwork, recognition, memory, play.
You guys gonna kiss for me? Huh? You gonna kiss? Are you? You are? Oh, thank you.
And so much more.
You talk to me today?
Ravens can also be very expressive with their looks. Both the actions and the way they display their feathers can be both comical and fun.
It's an interesting one. I don't know if I've seen that before.
It baffles me the loyalty these birds demonstrate towards each other. I would call it a type of love, but it's not so much romantic love as it is devotional love. These birds work together as a team to keep their territory free of other ravens.
Who's that up there? Who's that performing up there?
And to drive out competitive predators like bobcats, coyotes, and hawks.
Hi. 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 Nice ears. Hi.
Being natural scavengers, they also work together to play cleanup. They are almost always together as a pair. One may run off to another area in the park for a short time, but generally, if I can see one of the birds, the other is sure to be close by.
You guys are funny.
And during certain times of the day, they sit very close, sometimes side by side, facing each other, making all kinds of noises, and preening one another. And here we'll sit still and spend a little time with one of my favorite couples in Bryce. Because my adult birds at the park have been together so long, I don't get to see much in the way of beginning courtship behavior. What I do see each and every year is what seems to be a testing period where usually two different couples, sometimes more, will get together and sort of fly with each other, sometimes for about 20 minutes or so, other times for longer. Then the territories seem to be drawn up, and for the rest of the year, they are protected and defended by each couple. In fact, in most cases, defending the territory even takes priority over a food source.
More sticks? For your nest? You gotta be kidding.
Nest building seems to begin right after the squabbles for mate and territory are settled and over. Both birds participate, bringing different sizes of twigs and sticks from a number of different areas. Ravens are also known to line their nests with different kinds of material, including fur from bears, wolves, bobcats, coyotes, and many other animals that share the territory. Ravens build their nests in a variety of spots: on cliff sides, in trees, on power poles, inside rock formations, and I see a number on large buildings where the bird deterrent devices don't seem to affect ravens at all. And now mating season begins. The mating of birds, and especially ravens, is pretty boring, and it's what I'd call a simple touch-and-go affair. There's no cigarette after, no signs of wanting to take a nap. In fact, they just carry on as if nothing has happened at all. Once in a while, I might get some advance notice. The male may bring some sort of toy, tidbit to eat, and she might do a little tail wagging to say she's ready, but then it's just hop on, touch the parts under the tail rather quickly, and off we go. It all happens so quickly that out of the many times I've observed it, I've only been able to record it a couple of times. By the time I turn on my camera and it warms up to readiness, even though that's only a matter of seconds, they're already done.
Tail wagging.
Now keep in mind, we are talking the animal world here, not the human world, where there are supposedly a contract between couples. So it shouldn't be misread as some sort of adultery when there have been a few times when both I and others in the park have seen mating between birds that aren't couples. But for the most part, my time with the birds would suggest that most mating takes place pretty exclusively between the pair. During this mating time, the eggs get laid by the female and the whole process starts all over again. When I started this project 15 years ago, I thought I could tell a story, and then like all stories, there would be an end. The problem with these birds is the story never really ends, and there's always more to learn from the raven. I hope you've enjoyed our year with the ravens as much as I've enjoyed sharing it. You can keep up with our continuing animal adventures on our YouTube channel, The Raven Diaries, all one word. And then, get out there and make some of your own.